Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn. Do you need a miracle? The good news is that Jesus performed a lot of miracles when he was here. He only did ministry for 3 years, but lots of those are listed in the Bible, in the New Testament, especially the first 4 books of the New Testament, the Gospels, book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And also it's listed in one of those Gospels that so many miracles performed that there wouldn't be enough books to store all the miracles that Jesus performed. But I want to share one in particular today. It really spoke to me that I was reading recently. It's from John chapter 9, and it's when Jesus healed a blind man. It says in chapter 9, verse 1, as Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus replied, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed to him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After Jesus said this, he spit on the ground. He made some mud with the saliva and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told the man, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home being able to see. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, nah, he only looks like him. But the man himself insisted, I am that man. So then the people asked him, how then were your eyes open, they asked. The man replied, the man that they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. You know, we sing that song, Amazing Grace. It's such a powerful song that we've been singing now for many, many years. And I was just so blessed when I watched the Memorial Day concert in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. It was just powerful that night, an hour long. And they closed out that night singing Amazing Grace, which really surprised me. Unfortunately, it did surprise me, but just our nation has turned our back on God in so many areas. But I love that they closed at an Amazing Grace, and of course there's that one line in that song that says, I was once blind, but now I see. And so there's several takeaways in these 11 verses that I could share with you, but since our program is only 14 minutes long, I'm going to share 4 things that spoke to me just in these 11 verses. And the first one is, as you know, Jesus talked about that this guy was not punished. He was blind because of his parents' sins. He was doing it so the works of God might be displayed to him. And, you know, friends, I think one of those things that we need to be reminded of is that God never wastes a hurt in our lives. And I don't know what yours is. And, you know, I don't like the fact that I've been divorced. But you know what? Nobody to help a person that's gone through divorce than somebody like me that's been told, hey, I don't love you anymore. And, you know, nobody better to help somebody that's been diagnosed with cancer than somebody that's been through cancer. Nobody better to help somebody that's lost a child through an overdose of drugs or suicide than somebody that has been through that. And the list goes on and on. And so, you know, God will never let a hurt be wasted in your life if you allow him. And Jesus was saying this with this man, that, you know, that he was not being punished because he's blind, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed to him. So I want to encourage you, if there's been a wound or something in your life that has happened that's painful and doesn't seem fair, that if you will allow and humble yourself, God will allow that hurt to be a blessing to somebody else. And he will allow your scars to become someone else's stars. Somebody's lost hope, and you look up in the sky sometimes and you say, God, where are you? Well, you know what? You could be somebody's stars through your scars. So think about that today, and I want to encourage you just to ask God, what is one person that I could bless through maybe something unfortunate that I've been through in my life? Also in verse 6, Jesus, spit on the ground, used the mud, and put it on the guy's eyes. Well, that's kind of really radical to think about how he did that, why he did that. And yet, I think sometimes Jesus does simple things like that to show us he's a simple God. And we make it too complicated, especially those of us in the United States. Well, I'd do this, I'd start this ministry, or I'd help, do this event, but, I don't have blah, 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 blah. And I can remember when I had my sports talk radio show 5 years ago, and I did it for 3 years on a small AM station that actually is now a Hispanic station. But, we didn't have great ratings. In fact, you couldn't even listen to us on your online. Didn't have that capability, which was really frustrating. And so when I'd go to sell advertising, though, I'd always be in fear that somebody was going to ask me about that. Well, hey, can I listen to you online? And, man, so many times I would get in fear about that. But I heard somebody say one day, don't focus on what you don't have. Focus on what you do have. That's what God's given you, and that's enough to work with. And so what I was able to focus on was two things. Number one was that we were on drive time, 5 to 6 p.m., which is one of the most listened to times on radio, 5 to 6 p.m. drive time. And the second thing I had was that we came on right after Dave Ramsey. He was on from 2 to 5 p.m. on this station, and he is the third-ranked most listened to radio program in the whole country. Third. And so those were the two things I used to sell. Not that we were a small station, or two, that no, we did not have online capabilities for people to be able to listen to on their phones or on their laptops and things like that. So, I think Jesus here using this mud and spitting on upon the guy's eyes is that great reminder that he can use anything for good if we will humble ourselves and ask him, and don't focus on what you don't have, but focus on what you do have. All right, another thing that spoke to me through this passage in John chapter 9 was verse 9, when they said, is that the guy that was blind? This is the man that used to sit and beg? Another said, no, that only looks like him. But then the blind man said, no, I am that man. And, friends, I want to ask you today, do people see anything different in your lives because you're a follower of Jesus? I mean, people are watching. Your neighbors notice if you go to church, even in restaurants, man. I notice it when people pray over their meals. You don't see that as much, but when I do, it just blesses me. And a lot of times when I'm leaving a restaurant, if it's where I'm not interrupting them or something, I'll just say, hey, it was great to see you pray over your meal. Just to encourage us as followers of Jesus, that when we do these things, that, as I've said yesterday, that more is caught than taught. And when people see that, it's a great, great reminder. And so, the thing I want to ask you, are you any different than you are on Sunday mornings the rest of the week? Looking at maybe your vocabulary, the words that come out of your mouth. Are you positive? Are you negative? Some of the people I know that are followers of Jesus can be really critical, to be honest. And it's like, really? You go to more Bible studies than anybody I know. There was a person I knew once at a church that I served at, and this person led a lot of Bible studies, and, they had more Bible knowledge than I did as a pastor. But you know what? Man, they just did not treat people good a lot of times, and I wouldn't recommend people to their Bible studies because I wasn't sure how they would treat them. And that's really sad, friends. But people need to see a difference in us if we have spent time with Jesus, just like they did in this blind man. They're like, this guy's different. And obviously his was a major thing that he had sight, but they saw a difference in him. And so I want to ask you, are people seeing anything different in your life because you're a follower of Jesus? The way you spend your time, your money. I love it when people take a week's vacation from their job and they go to serve on a mission trip. You think it doesn't speak volumes to your coworkers when you go and do that instead of doing a week skiing or going to the beach and, There's nothing wrong with those things. I love those things. In fact, I've been able to do those the past couple of years because of financial situations. And you know what, man, I hope to get to go to the beach again. There's nothing wrong with that. God created those things. Those are beautiful. But, maybe if you're blessed enough to do those twice a year, maybe take one of those weeks of vacation and go and serve the less fortunate. Go somewhere to a third world country or something. Or you can even do mission trips here in the United States, inner city and places. I know some friends that went to Chicago one year, and they took a week's paid vacation and went and helped with some church plants in the inner city of Chicago in some really dangerous areas. But, man, their lives were changed forever because of that, and it spoke volumes to their coworkers. Final point I want to share with you comes out of verse 11. It says that the man replied, when they asked him, who opened your eyes? And in verse 11, this man replied, the man they call Jesus. He made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. So my takeaway from this verse 10 and especially verse 11 here in chapter 9 of John is that this man did what God asked him to do, even though, man, that had to be embarrassing. Somebody's spit and put mud on your eyes, and then they tell you to go to this place and, wash it off. And yet this guy was obedient. And look at the miracle that Jesus did in his life because of him being obedient. And so my question to you today is, what is it that God's calling you to do in your life? And it doesn't have to be something big. It may just be picking up the phone and calling a relative or a good friend that the relationship has been estranged for several months or several years because somebody got offended. And you know what? Maybe the other person did the offending, yet you know that God's been tugging at your heart over the last few months to say, call that person up and just say, hey, how are you doing? I know a guy told me recently that out of all places worked at a church, and they had an employee that they had to let go. And so it winds up that this person's, one of their spouses, their parents, one of their parents, I believe it was, passed away. And so they wanted to go to the funeral, but at the same time they were like, I don't know what kind of reaction I'm getting because I actually terminated this person's employment from our church. But the person just felt like God wanted them to go, so they were really nervous. But they went. And so the person was very gracious. And then a few days later, after everything had settled down and all, they sent just a tremendous email to this person, said, I can't tell you what a blessing it was that you came to the visitation of my parent. I believe it was the person's father, but it meant so much to me that you would come and be there during this time of loss and need. So, friends, it took a lot of courage for my friend to do that when you're somebody, the person that terminated somebody's job, and especially at a church out of all places. But it leads me back to my question to you from verse 11, where this man was obedient. What is it that God's calling you to do next? What is it that's uncomfortable, but God's asking you to do? And I don't know what that is, but you do. And I just want to challenge you and encourage you today to be obedient to whatever God's doing, because maybe you'll have a miracle done in your life, have a relationship restored, just like this man's sight was restored as he was obedient. My name is Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.
CMI is your full-service human resources provider in Central Kentucky. For 15 years, CMI Human Resources has taken great pride in helping organizations and people work. Whether it's employee handbooks or help in filling a position, no job is too large or too small for CMI. Contact the professionals today at CMI Human Resources, 859-296-2800, or online at cmiconsulting.com.